Welcome. You are now listening to Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, Part 1. In the grim summer heat of St. Petersburg, a young man named Rodion Raskolnikov roams the streets in a trance-like state. A former university student, once brilliant and promising, he's now drowning in poverty, pride, and a gnawing isolation. He hasn't eaten properly in days. He avoids his landlady because he can't pay rent, and he speaks to no one, trapped in a tightening spiral of thought. But underneath the hunger and hopelessness lies something darker, an idea that has taken root in his mind, wild and consuming. Raskolnikov believes that certain people, Napoleon-like figures, have the moral right to commit crimes if it means serving a greater good. He isn't sure if he's one of them, but he's obsessed with testing that boundary. In his mind, the perfect trial lies in killing a person he views as parasitic, Alyona Ivanovna, an old pawnbroker who profits off the desperation of the poor. She has no family who loves her, no legacy beyond hoarded trinkets. If he murders her and uses the money for good, wouldn't that be a form of justice? But the question twists and coils inside him. It's not just about morality. It's about power, pride, and proving to himself that he is not ordinary, that he matters. Before the crime, Raskolnikov tries to justify his plan by watching and testing the old woman. He visits her to pawn a watch, analyzing her routines. He meets her timid sister Lizaveta and overhears she'll be gone at a certain hour. The pieces fall into place. The door creaks open in his mind, and once it does, it's impossible to close. Meanwhile, his personal life unravels. He receives a letter from his mother Pulcheria revealing that his sister, Dunya, is engaged to a wealthy but morally repugnant man named Luzhin. The marriage is a sacrifice, a way to secure funds to support Raskolnikov's future, but instead of feeling grateful, he is consumed with rage. To him it feels like Dunya is selling herself, and he despises Luzhin instantly. His family's love feels like another burden he cannot carry. As the pressure builds, he finally acts. One hot evening, with an axe hidden in his coat, he climbs the stairs to Alyona's apartment. The murder is brutal, messy, far from the cold precision he envisioned. But just as he's about to escape, Lizaveta walks in. Her terrified silence seals her fate. He kills her too, not out of ideology, but sheer panic. What follows is not triumph, but total collapse. Raskolnikov returns home dazed, drenched in sweat and covered in guilt. He hides the stolen items beneath a rock, untouched. He doesn't care about the money. The deed was never about wealth. It was a test of his soul, and he's already failed. His body falls into fever, his mind cracks. He sleeps for days, plagued by nightmares and hallucinations. He's no longer a man trying to live above moral law. He's a man broken by it. He drifts through the city in a haze, increasingly paranoid. Everyone and everything feels like a threat. He believes the police suspect him already. In a strange moment of human connection, he meets Marmeladov, a drunken former official who pours out his story in a tavern. Marmeladov's daughter Sonia has become a prostitute to support the family, and his wife Katerina Ivanovna is slowly dying of illness and pride. Raskolnikov is both repelled and moved. Their suffering echoes his own, but their selflessness cuts into him like a blade. Soon after, Marmeladov dies in a carriage accident. Raskolnikov, without knowing why, donates his last few kopecks for the man's funeral. It is a flicker of compassion in the dark, but the darkness is winning. He begins to hallucinate. He's alternately lucid and delirious, angry and ashamed. Razumikin, his loyal friend, tries to help, but Raskolnikov keeps pushing everyone away. Even as his sister and mother arrive in Petersburg, full of hope and love, he cannot meet their gaze. The double life he now leads, the murderer on one side, the beloved son and student on the other, is tearing him apart. By the end of Part 1, the murder he hoped would free him has imprisoned him in a torment more brutal than any prison cell. He tried to act like a god, but now finds himself more broken than ever. His theory lies in ruins, and the punishment, unseen, creeping, and internal, has already begun. Part 2. The murder have been committed, but Raskolnikov isn't free, he's unraveling. Part 2 begins in a haze. Rodion wakes up in his tiny room, dazed and feverish. The axe is returned, the evidence hidden, but the real danger lies inside him. His mind is fractured, his emotions uncontainable. What was supposed to be an act of greatness, a moment of godlike judgment, now festers within him like a rot. He swings from paranoia to indifference, from self-loathing to sudden flashes of euphoria. The crime hasn't liberated him. It has shackled his soul. Physically ill and mentally spiraling, he isolates himself. Days pass in fever. Razumikin, his loyal friend, becomes his reluctant caretaker. Though baffled by Raskolnikov's wild moods and isolation, Razumikin brings medicine and warmth, something like friendship, maybe even salvation. But Raskolnikov can't let anyone truly in. Guilt keeps him on edge. Every knock on the door feels like the police. When he finally ventures out, his paranoia intensifies. A summons from the police, not for the murder but over a debt, nearly makes him collapse. In the police office, his erratic behavior, fainting, and suspicious timing plant seeds of doubt in the minds of investigators, especially the cold, calculating Porfiry Petrovich, who quietly begins to take an interest in him. But Raskolnikov is haunted by more than fear of arrest. It's the moral weight of what he's done that crushes him. He wanders back to the murder scene as if drawn by a masochistic need to relive it. In a surreal moment, he asks the painter working there strange, probing questions. His obsession is transparent. He wants to be caught, but he also wants to outwit justice. And then he meets Sonia, not formally, just a glimpse of her fragile, broken presence as he revisits Marmeladov's impoverished family. She is now fully a prostitute, her eyes filled with shame and strength. Her suffering radiates something deeper than anything Raskolnikov can articulate. She lives in degradation but clings to faith. In her he sees both judgment and mercy, something he doesn't yet understand but instinctively fears. His family arrives. His mother, Pulcheria, and sister Dunya come to support him. Their reunion is anything but joyful. Raskolnikov is cold and erratic, recoiling from their affection. He disapproves of Dunya's engagement to Luzhin, who believes marrying a poor but respectable woman will enhance his image. Luzhin, proud and manipulative, sees Raskolnikov as a threat and tries to undermine him. In the middle of all this, Razumikin grows closer to Dunya. Their bond blossoms into a subtle promise of mutual respect, perhaps even love. Unlike Raskolnikov, Razumikin is grounded. He believes in effort, not theories. His kindness and decency begin to highlight just how far Raskolnikov has drifted from the world of real human connection. Meanwhile, Raskolnikov cannot stop testing his limits. He visits the police again, offering erratic monologues and probing questions. Porfiry listens patiently, playing psychological chess. He suspects Raskolnikov, but says nothing directly. Their conversation is electric, layered with unspoken truths, intellectual taunts, and rising tension. And then comes a moment of almost supernatural horror. At Marmeladov's funeral feast, an outburst reveals Luzhin's true colors. He insults Sonia and tries to sow discord between Raskolnikov and his family. But Raskolnikov stands firm, defending Sonia, publicly, fiercely. For the first time he takes a moral stance, not out of theory, but empathy. Yet the gesture does little to relieve his inner torment. By the end of Part 2, the mask of superiority has shattered. Raskolnikov is no longer a man flirting with abstract greatness. He is a man tormented by what he's done, by who he might become. The punishment is not waiting for a courtroom or a prison, it is already here, living inside him. He begins to see the world through fractured glass. Every human interaction now carries unbearable weight. Every street corner reminds him of blood. And worst of all, he's starting to realize that his philosophical experiment wasn't proof of his power, but of his deepest vulnerability. Part 3. The noose is tightening. Raskolnikov's mental state, already fractured, grows even more unstable. The murder was committed long ago, but the consequences echo louder with each passing day. In Part 3, the psychological pressure intensifies, and Raskolnikov is no longer able to maintain the illusion of distance. His world is folding inward, friends, family, and the law all circling around his guilty heart. The section begins with an important turn. Porfiry Petrovich, the investigating magistrate, emerges from the shadows as a cunning and calculating adversary. He invites Raskolnikov for what seems like a casual conversation about crime and morality, but every word feels like a trap. Porfiry doesn't accuse, he probes, he theorizes, he plays games. Their dialogues are chess matches in which Raskolnikov tries to mask his growing dread with intellectual bravado. But it's clear, Porfiry suspects him, and Raskolnikov knows it. At the same time, Razumikin, loyal as ever, is becoming the unlikely glue, holding the frayed edges of Raskolnikov's life together. As Raskolnikov lashes out, isolates himself, and flits between rage and remorse, Razumikin offers stability. He takes care of Raskolnikov's mother and sister, even while not fully understanding the strange moods of his friend. His relationship with Dunya begins to evolve beyond concern. There's affection, admiration, and the beginnings of love, but hanging over them all is the silent shadow of what Raskolnikov has done. Luzhin returns, eager to assert control over Dunya. He is offended by Raskolnikov's dismissive behavior and Razumikin's rising influence. His arrogance is increasingly transparent, and Dunya begins to see through him. Luzhin believes in power, in dominance, in self-serving justice. He is in many ways the man Raskolnikov fears he could become, a person who uses ideology to justify cruelty. In a moment of both collapse and clarity, Raskolnikov visits Sonia. This time their conversation is deep and painful. He challenges her faith, mocks her suffering, and yet is clearly drawn to her compassion. She becomes his mirror, someone who suffers in silence, who lives at the edge of society but who clings to hope. For Raskolnikov, her purity is almost unbearable. Later, Raskolnikov is confronted by a bitter twist of fate. A man falsely confesses to the murder. The news shakes him. He is horrified, not relieved. The confession confirms that the justice system can be arbitrary and worse. It means an innocent man may suffer for his crime. The philosophical clarity he once sought now feels grotesque. The lines between justice, punishment, and morality are blurring fast. Porfiry summons Raskolnikov again. This time the encounter is more direct. The conversation revolves around theories of extraordinary men, those who supposedly stand above the law. Porfiry is baiting him, and Raskolnikov knows it. He becomes defensive, rambling, but still clever. Yet Porfiry isn't looking for a confession. He's watching for a crack, and he sees one. Throughout this part, Raskolnikov oscillates violently between wanting to confess and holding on to his pride. His guilt is unbearable, but his fear of surrendering control is stronger. The internal war rages on. In his lowest moments, he roams the city like a ghost, hallucinating, taunting fate to catch him. In his highest, he tries to act like nothing happened. But the mask is slipping. One of the most painful scenes comes when Raskolnikov visits Marmeladov's family and sees Katerina Ivanovna's complete mental collapse. She's driven by desperation and delusions of nobility, parading her children through the streets to prove their honor. Her breakdown reflects the societal cruelty that punishes the weak while allowing predators like Luzhin to rise. Her descent into madness mirrors Raskolnikov's own. Both are casualties of a world that devours those who can't conform. At the end of Part 3, Raskolnikov is no longer just a man haunted by guilt. He is a man hunted by truth. Every conversation feels like a trap, every gesture a potential unveiling. The psychological pressure is immense and his facade is crumbling. But perhaps the most haunting realization is that the punishment has already begun. Not in a cell, not from a judge, but in the silence after conversations, the sleepless nights, the inability to look his sister in the eye or feel the warmth of his mother's touch without flinching. He is imprisoned within himself, and he doesn't know how to break free. Part 4. Raskolnikov's world continues to spiral, but now the descent becomes more tangled, more chaotic. He's not only contending with guilt, but with the rising storm of consequences. In Part 4, everything sharpens: suspicion, confrontation, self-hatred, and the unrelenting pulse of justice inching closer. At the start of this section, Raskolnikov's detachment fractures further. His mother and sister are still in the city, desperate for his attention and affection, but he oscillates between moments of tenderness and cruelty. He doesn't know how to accept their love without choking on shame. His behavior is erratic, and Dunya begins to fear what he's becoming. Luzhin, meanwhile, makes his move. He tries to drive a wedge between Raskolnikov and his family, painting himself as the victim of Rodion's volatility. But his attempt backfires. When he visits the family, Raskolnikov exposes Luzhin's manipulative nature and insults him with a fiery, calculated fury. Dunya sees the truth and breaks off the engagement. Luzhin leaves humiliated, but not defeated. He's a man who thrives on vengeance. Raskolnikov continues to be drawn to Sonia, though he doesn't yet understand why. She too is broken, living in poverty, selling her body to keep her stepmother and siblings alive. But there's something transcendent about her. She believes in forgiveness, in a kind of spiritual endurance that baffles him. He visits her, questions her faith, mocks her suffering, but always returns. Sonia becomes his tether, even as he fights it. A major confrontation brews when Raskolnikov receives a strange invitation from Svidrigailov, Dunya's former employer and a deeply unsettling figure. Svidrigailov confesses that he's still obsessed with Dunya and plans to pursue her, despite being responsible for the suicide of his wife. He offers money to help Raskolnikov's family, but his motives reek of self-interest. Raskolnikov sees in Svidrigailov a grotesque reflection of what he might become, a man devoid of moral compass, living by whim and desire, cloaked in charm and corruption. But the most nerve-wracking event of Part 4 is Raskolnikov's increasingly psychological duel with Porfiry Petrovich. Porfiry summons him again under the pretense of discussing an old article Raskolnikov once wrote on crime and morality. The conversation begins mildly, but turns into a slow-burning interrogation. Porfiry circles around the murder without touching it directly. He drops hints, he talks about guilt. He theorizes about criminal psychology in a way that feels eerily personal. Raskolnikov, cornered yet brilliant, tries to bluff and counter. But Porfiry doesn't need a confession. He's letting the guilt do the work. The tension builds even further when another man, Nikolai, the painter, confesses to the murder of the pawnbroker. Raskolnikov is stunned. This is his chance to walk away, to be free. But instead he's sickened. His crime is now being falsely attributed, and an innocent man may suffer. The intellectual justification he once used for the murder, that he was an extraordinary man above the law, starts to dissolve. All that remains is the sickening reality of what he's done. He returns to Sonia, this time not to question but to seek refuge. He's teetering on the edge of confession. In a heartbreaking scene, he asks her to read the story of Lazarus' resurrection from the Bible. Sonia's trembling voice fills the silence between them. It's a moment of profound spiritual intimacy. She believes in redemption, in the possibility of rising again after death. Raskolnikov isn't sure if he believes, but he wants to. That night he finally reveals the truth to Sonia. He confesses the murder. Not to the police, but to her. Her response is not horror, but compassion. She doesn't run, she doesn't scream, she listens, she weeps. And then she promises to walk beside him no matter where the path leads. In this moment, something inside Raskolnikov begins to shift, not healed, not yet redeemed, but no longer completely alone. As part 4 closes, the lines are drawn. Svidrigailov is lurking, dangerous and determined. Porfiry is waiting, patient and methodical. The world knows, the walls are closing in, but Sonia knows too, and with her, a glimmer of hope enters Raskolnikov's shattered soul. The punishment has not ended. But now, for the first time, Raskolnikov can see that maybe, just maybe, redemption is not impossible. Part 5. By now, Raskolnikov is a man standing on a precipice, his crime confessed to Sonia, his guilt too heavy to bear alone. But the outer world hasn't closed in yet. Instead, it tightens slowly and with cruel precision. Part 5 opens with Luzhin's revenge. Stung by Dunya's rejection, Luzhin hatches a cruel plan to ruin Sonia, the only person who still holds Raskolnikov's fragile trust. He invites himself to Katerina Ivanovna's already chaotic memorial dinner for Marmeladov and slips money, stealthily, into Sonia's pocket. Then he accuses her of theft in front of everyone. It's a calculated strike, intended to disgrace her and, by extension, damage Raskolnikov's credibility. But Luzhin's plan backfires spectacularly. Lebedianikov, his self-righteous but sharp roommate, exposes the truth. Luzhin is publicly humiliated. Dunya and Pulcheria Alexandrovna, already disgusted, sever ties completely. In this moment, the reader and Raskolnikov witnesses something rare, a man more morally bankrupt than even a murderer. Luzhin's destruction isn't physical but social and spiritual. No redemption arc awaits him. In the aftermath, Katerina Ivanovna unravels. Her pride, poverty, and sorrow consume her sanity. Convinced her late husband was of noble descent, she drags her children through the streets, pleading for charity with a kind of feverish grandeur. She imagines herself staging performances, seeking justice from authorities who will never listen. When she collapses, bloody, raving, broken, it's Sonia who remains by her side, holding her hand as life slips away. Raskolnikov watches this unfold in anguish. Katerina's fall is not just madness, it's society's cruelty made manifest. The irony is unbearable. He killed to spare suffering, to fix a world full of injustice, and yet here in front of him is a woman destroyed not by her flaws, but by the system itself. After the funeral, Raskolnikov pulls Sonia aside and hands her a folded slip of paper. A confession. Not to the police, but to her again. He's torn between his towering pride and the undeniable pull of truth. He can't live with the lie. He tells her he's considering going to the authorities, and she, with trembling grace, urges him to go, not to be punished by men, but to begin healing his soul. But before he can act, another shadow rises, Svidrigailov. The mysterious, manipulative man has been circling Raskolnikov like a vulture, and now he pounces. He knows Raskolnikov's secret. He taunts him, not just with knowledge of the murder, but with what he plans to do with Dunya. He wants her, still. And he knows she'll never come willingly. Svidrigailov is the embodiment of unchecked desire, of a life lived without conscience. He blackmails, lies, and charms without a second thought. He's also slipping into his own form of madness, haunted by his dead wife's ghost, plagued by disturbing dreams, and sickened by the realization that his pleasures no longer satisfy. He's a man who has everything and nothing. When Dunya confronts him, he traps her. He locks her in a room and threatens her with violence, manipulation, even suicide. But Dunya proves stronger than he expected. She fights. She pulls a revolver on him, and in that moment of defiance, she severs whatever hold he had. Svidrigailov lets her go, not out of mercy, but because something inside him has finally snapped. Raskolnikov, meanwhile, is at a crossroads. Porfiry calls him in one last time. But this time the tone has changed. The interview isn't a game anymore. It's a quiet, almost fatherly confrontation. Porfiry knows. He tells Raskolnikov he has the proof, but he offers him a path forward. Confess now, and maybe, even after years of prison, life can begin again. Porfiry isn't the enemy. He's a strange kind of shepherd, trying to guide a lost soul back toward the light. But Raskolnikov isn't ready, not yet. He flees. The part ends with two men unraveling in parallel. Svidrigailov, after one final act of charity, giving money to Sonia for Raskolnikov's redemption, takes his own life. He walks into the rain, stares into the void, and pulls the trigger. He was too far gone. Raskolnikov, however, still stands. He walks the streets in a daze, his heart in pieces. The world hasn't forgiven him, but one person, Sonia, has. And now, for the first time, he's beginning to believe that might be enough to try again. Part 6. The storm has broken, but Raskolnikov is still running. Part 6 begins with a suffocating tension. Raskolnikov has confessed to Sonia. He's admitted the murder, yet he remains at war with himself, hovering between surrender and pride, shadowed by a relentless inner judgment. It's no longer a question of whether the world will discover his guilt, but whether he will allow himself to face it fully. Porfiry Petrovich, the inspector, continues to circle closer, but he shifts tactics. No longer the cat-and-mouse player baiting traps, he now speaks like a weary observer who sees through Raskolnikov's soul. He tells Raskolnikov outright, "I know you did it," but Porfiry doesn't threaten. He pleads. He urges him to confess, not for society's sake, but for his own healing. There is a moment of remarkable humanity between them. Porfiry is no longer just the law, he is the echo of conscience. And still, Raskolnikov cannot bring himself to yield. Around him, the people he loves begin to suffer in his silence. Dunya, fiercely protective of him, is caught in her own horrifying ordeal. Svidrigailov is still in the shadows, pursuing her with a mixture of obsession and despair. Dunya meets him in a final confrontation, where he confesses his moral decay, his loneliness, his loss of meaning. But she resists him, and in doing so, crushes the last illusion he had of control. That same night, Svidrigailov drifts through the city, untethered and numb. He gives money to Sonia to ensure Raskolnikov's family is cared for. Then, with haunting detachment, he walks into a dirty inn, lies down in a courtyard, and shoots himself. His end is quiet, tragic, and devastatingly hollow. A man without faith, without love, without truth. He dies as he lived, untouchable and alone. Meanwhile, Raskolnikov sinks deeper into isolation. Even as his family surrounds him with concern, he pushes them away. His mother clings to the image of her brilliant, misunderstood son, unaware of the weight he carries. Dunya waits for him to speak, to reach for her, but he can't. He wanders. The streets like a ghost. Pride and guilt wrestle inside him like twin serpents, devouring whatever remains of his peace. The emotional centerpiece of this part is a scene with Sonia. He tells her he is ready. He will go to the crossroads, kneel, and confess. But when he gets there, he hesitates. He cannot bring himself to bow. His pride even now is suffocating, and yet he returns to her, broken, trembling, but still walking. Then comes the moment. In a crowded police station with Porfiry absent, Raskolnikov walks in. The room is ordinary, nothing dramatic, yet for him it is the crossing of a threshold. He declares his crime aloud. The officers are stunned. The confession feels anticlimactic, and yet it is everything. It is the first honest act he's committed since the murder. Raskolnikov is sentenced to Siberia, and in this grim exile, something extraordinary begins to grow, not in him, but in Sonia. She follows him. She gives up everything to remain near him, to visit him, to wait. Raskolnikov in the early days remains aloof. He works, lives, survives. But inside, the transformation is slow. He resents her love. He questions her faith. He cannot understand her devotion, and yet he depends on it. He begins to dream. In one vision, a plague spreads across the world, not of illness, but of ideas. Men are infected with ideologies that turn them against one another, unable to agree on truth or justice. Civilization collapses into chaos. It is a metaphor for his mind, for a world where there is no moral anchor. When he wakes, Sonia is there. And finally, after months of inner torment, a seed cracks open inside him. He looks at her not as a symbol, not as a martyr, but as a person. He feels something unfamiliar and terrifying. Love, raw and real. He breaks down. He lays his head at her feet, sobbing not out of shame but relief. It is not the state that punishes him. It is life, offering him the chance to begin again. Part the sixth ends not with resolution but with possibility. The punishment has been served in part. The crime, internal, philosophical, emotional, is still unraveling. But for the first time, Raskolnikov isn't alone in his suffering. And through Sonia, through love and sacrifice, redemption no longer seems unreachable. He has crossed the threshold, not just into exile, but into a new form of life. Epilogue. Almost 2 years have passed. Rodion Raskolnikov is now a convict in a Siberian prison. The place is harsh, desolate, bound by walls and silence, but the true prison is still within him. He serves his sentence not as a man fully broken, nor one fully repentant, but as someone suspended in a state of numb endurance. His days pass with mechanical labor, his heart still proud, his soul still clouded, but he is not alone. Sonia has followed him. Quietly, faithfully, without demands or declarations. She lives nearby in the town and visits him when she can. She works herself to the bone, sewing and helping the poor just to be close. Her presence is like a soft thread, tying him to life, a thread he refuses to acknowledge but cannot bear to sever. Inside the prison walls, Raskolnikov is an outsider. The other prisoners mistrust him. He is too distant, too aloof. He does not confess to them, nor cry, nor rage. He carries himself with a strange superiority, as though he believes himself above the others, even above his own punishment. This earns him only more isolation. Meanwhile, back in Petersburg, life has moved on. His mother, Pulcheria Alexandrovna, never recovered from the emotional wreckage. She died believing in her son's innocence, her mind slowly fading in blissful delusion. Dunya has married Razumikin, and they live modestly but happily, grounded by honesty and love. They write to Raskolnikov often but receive little in return. He cannot face them. Not yet. One day, after an illness that leaves him weak and confused, Raskolnikov finds the small New Testament Sonia once read to him from, the same passage about the raising of Lazarus. He hadn't opened it before. It had felt alien, irrelevant. But now, without quite understanding why, he holds it differently, not as a symbol but as a seed of something yet to grow. Then something changes. It happens quietly. No dramatic epiphany, no blinding light. Just a simple moment shared with Sonia. He sees her, truly sees her, not as a burden or reminder of his shame, but as a source of life. For the first time, he allows himself to feel love. And in doing so, he begins to shed the shell of theory and pride he's been hiding behind. The final lines of the novel do not proclaim redemption, but they suggest its beginning. Raskolnikov has not been transformed by the prison, nor by the law. His punishment was never about Siberia. It was about his refusal to live in the world of human connection and moral humility. In Sonia's love, he finds the first true answer to the question he asked when he lifted the axe. He had believed he could live by reason alone, that morality was for lesser people. But now he begins to feel something far deeper, a kind of resurrection of the heart. As the story ends, Raskolnikov lies on his prison cot with the Testament under his pillow and Sonia nearby. The path ahead is still long, 7 more years of hard labor. But in those final pages, he no longer sees them as a wall. He sees them as time. Time to live again. Time to rebuild. The story of his crime is over. But the story of his redemption, his gradual, painful human rebirth, has just begun.